If your father owned a set of tools, they were Craftsman. If your mother called a repairman, he came from Sears. The battery that started the car every winter morning was DieHard. The washer in the basement, the one that still works, was Kenmore. And every September, a catalog arrived that smelled like ink and possibility. You circled the toys. Your parents dog-eared the appliances. That book was the first draft of Christmas morning for 60 years. One store. Every room in the house. Every stage of life. $2.7 billion left the company in a single transaction in July 2015. Not to a competitor, not to a creditor. To a real estate company controlled by the same man running Sears. He engineered a deal where the company sold its own buildings. Then it paid rent to stand inside them. And here is the part nobody talks about. The lease gave him the right to walk into any Sears store, the store where your father bought his first set of Craftsman wrenches, and take back half the floor space. No negotiation, no approval needed, just a clause on page 31. That is what this channel finds. The clause that kills the thing you trusted. If you want to see the next one, subscribe now. By 2018, Sears filed for bankruptcy. By 2026, 5 stores remain. If you have ever asked what happened to Sears, the answer is not what you think. 3,495 stores did not close because of Amazon. They closed because one man found the clause that let him drain a 130-year-old company from the inside while running it. In the next 30 minutes, 3 things. First, how a hedge fund manager turned a merger into a dismantling operation and spent 13 years selling Sears to himself. Second, the exact contract structure that extracted $2.7 billion in real estate, $900 million in brands, and $350 million in rent from a company that was still open. And third, why the exact contract structure that let the architect of the collapse buy the remaining assets at auction was entirely legal. That number, $2.7 billion. Remember it. You are going to see where every dollar went. Here is what that store was worth to the country it served. In 1893, a railroad station agent and a watchmaker in Chicago incorporated a catalog company called Sears, Roebuck & Company. Within a decade, it was the largest retailer in the United States. The catalog changed what it meant to buy something in America. If you lived 60 miles from the nearest store, Sears shipped a washing machine to your door, a set of tools, a winter coat. Between 1908 and the 1940s, they shipped entire houses, prefabricated kit homes, lumber and nails and blueprints in a crate for as little as $600. You ordered a house from a catalog the way you would order a pair of boots. The lumber arrived by rail car. The plumbing came labeled. You and your neighbors built it on a Saturday. An estimated 100,000 of those houses are still standing today. Families live in them. Some do not even know their house is a Sears house until they find the shipping stamps on the framing lumber in the basement. Those houses have outlasted the company that built them by a generation. In 1925, they opened the first physical store. By the 1950s, Sears was anchoring shopping malls in every suburb in the country. Families drove to Sears on Saturday morning, the way they drove to church on Sunday. The parking lot was full by 10. Your dad headed for the tool department. Your mom browsed appliances. You rode the escalator until someone told you to stop. The auto center changed the oil while you shopped. The popcorn was free. And the salesman in the tie who had worked there for 20 years knew the difference between every refrigerator on the floor because his commission depended on it. By the early 1970s, 2 out of 3 Americans shopped at Sears in any given quarter. 350,000 employees. Revenue tripled between 1941 and 1954, then tripled again over the next 20 years. In 1973, they built the tallest building in the world as their headquarters, the Sears Tower, 110 stories of confidence that this company would be here forever. One company. Craftsman, Kenmore, DieHard, Allstate, Discover, the Wish Book at Christmas, the repairman who knew your name, the lifetime warranty they actually honored. If you bought a Kenmore washer in the 90s, it is probably still running in your basement right now. Go into any garage in America and open the toolbox. The old wrenches at the bottom, the ones with the worn handles and the sockets that still click, are Craftsman. Those tools are still there. The company that made them is not. And the man who sold appliances at your local Sears for 30 years, the one who knew every model on the floor, his pension went with it. And here is the fact that should make you furious. Sears shut down its catalog in 1993. The same year, a man named Jeff Bezos incorporated a company that sold books by mail from his garage. Sears had the warehouses, the logistics, the supplier relationships, the 100-year head start on shipping products to American homes. They killed the one thing that could have made them Amazon before Amazon existed. And the reason they killed it is the same reason everything else went wrong. The people running Sears stopped caring about selling things and started caring about selling Sears. Remember that. It matters in about 10 minutes. Now, before we get to the man who finished the job, you need to see the company that looked exactly like Sears and died 20 years earlier. Because the blueprint was already public. Montgomery Ward, founded in 1872. Same catalog. Same wide aisles with the Saturday morning families. Your grandparents had a Ward catalog on the kitchen table right next to the Sears one. By the 1990s, Ward anchored hundreds of shopping centers. In 1997, bankruptcy. By 2001, every store gone. 35,000 jobs. The parking lots went quiet. Ward proved the rule. When the land becomes more valuable than the store becomes optional. Sears watched that lesson, then hired the kind of person who treats optional as a business plan. Eddie Lampert made his fortune as a hedge fund manager. His fund, ESL Investments, bought Kmart out of bankruptcy in 2003 for a fraction of its asset value. Kmart was already gutted. 1,200 stores closed, 60,000 jobs gone. The blue light special was a punchline. But Lampert did not buy Kmart to save it. He bought it because a bankrupt company with 300 stores sitting on valuable land could be had for less than the dirt was worth. That was the first lesson. Retail companies own real estate, and real estate can be separated from retail. In 2005, Lampert merged Kmart with Sears to form Sears Holdings Corporation. The company had over 3,500 stores, $55 billion in annual revenue, and 300,000 employees. Business magazines compared him to Warren Buffett. He was 42 years old. He had just assembled the largest real estate portfolio in American retail, and he called it a retail company. But Lampert was not a retailer. He was a value investor, and there is a difference between looking at a store and seeing Saturday afternoon and looking at a store and seeing a balance sheet with an undervalued real estate line. ESL Investments held roughly 53% of Sears Holdings stock. Lampert served as chairman, then as chief executive officer. He had control over every major decision the company would make for the next 13 years. And the first thing he did with that control is the thing that tells you everything. He stopped spending money on the stores. Capital expenditure dropped year after year. The stores where families had shopped for 3 generations started falling apart. Roofs leaked and did not get fixed. Escalators broke and stayed broken for months. Shelves went thin. The fluorescent lights flickered in aisles that used to be packed on a Saturday. Employees described buildings with merchandise that looked like it had been there since 1983. Paint peeled off walls. Bathrooms went out of service. The parking lots cracked and the lines faded, and nobody repainted them. In some stores, entire departments went dark. The jewelry counter closed. The shoe section shrank to a single wall. The catalog desk where you used to order anything in America sat empty. One former employee who worked at Sears for over a decade said Lampert gutted sales commissions so badly that the experienced appliance salespeople, the ones who actually knew every Kenmore model on the floor, left. They were replaced with staff who could not explain the difference between two refrigerators. The salesman who knew your name was gone. The repairman who came to your house was outsourced. If your DieHard battery died, nobody at the counter could tell you which one fit your car. Sales collapsed because the expertise walked out the door and the building fell apart around whoever stayed. Here is the question you should be holding in your head. If you are the chief executive officer of a retail company and you systematically destroy the thing that makes people walk into your stores, are you incompetent? Or are you making the stores worth less on paper so you can buy them cheaper through another company you control? If you worked at Sears, you already know the answer. Tell me what you saw. We are about to find out. Lampert restructured Sears internally into dozens of competing business units. Appliances against clothing, tools against automotive, each division measured against the others for profitability. The stated intent was internal competition. The actual effect was the destruction of internal cooperation. The tool department stopped helping the appliance department. Appliances stopped helping clothing. Buyers in one division refused to share supplier contacts with buyers in another. Employees in the same store, under the same leaking roof, competed for floor space and marketing dollars as though they worked for different companies. A store stopped functioning like a store and started functioning like a collection of businesses that happened to share a building and had no reason to help each other. Customers felt it as one thing. Nobody cared anymore. Revenue fell from $55 billion in 2005 to under $17 billion by 2017. Every single quarter, same-store sales declined for over a decade. The stores bled, and the money to fix them was going somewhere else entirely. In 2014, Lampert spun off Land's End as a separate company. Reliable revenue? Gone. Then the real extraction began. On July 7, 2015, a new company called Seritage Growth Properties began trading on the New York Stock Exchange. It was a real estate investment trust. Its entire portfolio, every single property, came from Sears. Sears sold 266 of its stores, the buildings where your family shopped for appliances and tools and school clothes, across 49 states to Seritage for $2.7 billion. Then Sears signed master lease agreements to rent those same buildings back and keep operating inside them. You sell your house. You pay rent to live in it. Cash hits the bank account immediately. Rent drains it slowly. Once you understand that move, you will recognize it instantly, because private equity used a cousin of it to turn Toys R Us into a debt engine. Here is the part that makes this different from a normal sale leaseback. Eddie Lampert was the CEO of Sears. Eddie Lampert was the chairman of Seritage. ESL Investments, his hedge fund, was the largest shareholder in both companies. The entity selling the buildings and the entity buying the buildings were controlled by the same man. The press release called it a transformation to an asset-light, member-centric integrated retailer. If you strip the corporate language, it says, "We are selling our most valuable assets to ourselves." And the lease terms were not negotiated, not according to the lawsuit that followed. Seritage had the contractual right to recapture up to 50% of the floor space at any Sears store, at any time, at its sole discretion. The store where you bought your DieHard battery, the store where your kids rode the escalator. Seritage could walk in, take half the building, and lease that space to someone else at a higher rate. When Sears closed a location, it owed Seritage a termination payment. When Seritage recaptured space, it leased the recaptured half to a cheesecake factory or a gym willing to pay triple. Every outcome, whether Sears stayed or left, funneled money from the operating company to the real estate investment trust. You decide if that was rescue or raid. By 2017, Sears had paid Seritage $349 million in rent, plus another $45 million in termination fees from closed stores. Sears later alleged in court filings that the purchase price was not negotiated at arm's length, that it was set unilaterally by Lampert and insiders, and that it undervalued the transferred real estate by at least $649 million. Shareholders filed suit. The settlement was $40 million against $2.7 billion in transferred assets. Some people call that accountability. Others call it a receipt. Here is what left the building: 42 million square feet of real estate transferred, $2.7 billion in Seritage proceeds, $349 million in rent paid back to Seritage in 2 years, $45 million in termination fees. That is the real estate side. The building, not the business. Now, the brands. $900 million from selling Craftsman to Stanley Black & Decker. Land's End already gone. Kenmore and DieHard stripped for parts. $200 million per year in debt service eating what remained. And the result? Revenue fell from $55 billion to under $17 billion. Debt stood at $11.3 billion against assets of $6.9 billion. Stores fell from 3,500 to under 700 at bankruptcy. Employees dropped from 300,000 to 68,000. Today, 5 stores. The Sears Tower was renamed Willis Tower in 2009. The company does not own its own name on the skyline. Those numbers deserve to breathe for a moment. But the extraction was not finished. In January 2017, Sears sold Craftsman to Stanley Black & Decker for approximately $900 million. $525 million at closing, $250 million after 3 years, plus a percentage of future sales for 15 years. The tool brand that defined reliability for 3 generations. The wrench your father never replaced. The socket set your grandfather handed down. The lifetime warranty that meant something when a handshake still meant something. By then, Craftsman had already started shipping production to China. The tools your father swore by were not the same tools on the shelf. They were sold. The cash from selling Craftsman did not go into fixing the stores where Craftsman was sold. It went to covering operating losses and servicing debt. Every brand that gave someone a reason to walk into Sears was peeled off and sold. Craftsman, Kenmore, DieHard. Land's End was already gone. The salesman was gone. The repairman was gone. The wish book was gone. Now the names on the shelves were gone too. Each sale followed identical logic. Generate immediate cash. Remove a long-term reason for the store to exist. Use the cash to buy time. Repeat until there is nothing left to sell except the building. And if you watched our video on the claws that killed 1,000 American malls, you already know what happened next. When Sears closed a store inside a shopping mall, the CO tenancy clauses activated. Smaller tenants triggered rent reductions or broke their leases entirely. The shoe store, the jewelry kiosk, the food court where your mother left you with a slice of Sparrow while she shopped. One anchor departure cascaded through the property like circuit breakers tripping down a panel. The mall's income dropped below its bond covenant. The servicer took over. The building entered a death spiral. Sears was one of the most common anchor tenants in America. Every Sears closure was a detonation inside a mall's financial structure. And the Seritage transaction accelerated this. As Seritage recaptured space from Sears to lease to other tenants, the remaining Sears footprint shrank inside each mall, weakening the anchor effect. In some malls, the departure of Sears was the event that tipped the property from viable to terminal. The parking lot where your dad taught you to drive went empty. The entrance you walked through to get to the rest of the mall was boarded shut. Drive past your old Sears today and look at what replaced it. A fitness chain. A Spirit Halloween that opens for 2 months a year. A self-storage facility. A parking structure. Some locations sit completely empty. Chain link fence across the entrance. Weeds growing through the loading dock. The building where 3 generations bought Christmas presents is a concrete shell with a for-lease sign that nobody calls about. That is what Seritage recaptured. This is not just a company story. It is a structural story about how one company's financial engineering propagated through the commercial real estate system and helped collapse the American shopping mall from the inside. The malls did not just lose a tenant, they lost the contractual foundation that held the rent rolls together. October 15, 2018. Sears Holdings filed for Chapter 11. Bankruptcy. $11.3 billion in debt against $6.9 billion in assets. Fewer than 700 stores, 68,000 employees remaining. But that number does not capture what happened in the towns. When a Sears closed, the employees did not transfer to another location. There was no other location. The appliance specialist who had worked there since 1989 applied at Home Depot. The automotive technician who had serviced cars in the same bay for 20 years filed for unemployment. Pensions that employees had been promised for decades were caught inside the bankruptcy proceedings. Retirees who had spent 30 years on the floor discovered their benefits were unsecured claims, which means they stood in line behind the bondholders and the lawyers and the banks. Some received pennies on the dollar. Some received nothing. The liquidation sales were the final indignity. 70% off everything. Customers picked through the bones of the store their families had relied on for generations. The fixtures were for sale. The shelving was for sale. The sign out front was for sale. The litigation over Seritage, the asset sales, and the self-dealing allegations turned the bankruptcy into a proceeding that dragged on for years. And then the final move. In January 2019, ESL Investments won the bankruptcy auction for the remaining Sears assets. The bid was $5.2 billion. Lampert's fund created a new entity called Transform CO to operate what was left, roughly 400 stores. The name itself was a tell. Not Sears Reborn, not Sears Holdings, Transform Company, as though the word Sears had become a liability. Transform Co. continued closing stores. By 2020, fewer than 100 remained. By 2025, fewer than 20. The man who critics argued had extracted the value from Sears while it was alive now owned the company after it was dead. He sat on both sides of the extraction and both sides of the burial. Whether that was a rescue or the final move in a longer extraction depends on one question, and it is the same question that runs underneath every number in this story. Was Sears already dying when Lampert arrived? The case is not weak. Walmart had surpassed Sears as the largest retailer in 1991. Home Depot took the tool customer. Best Buy took electronics. Target took the young family. Amazon took the catalog customer that Sears had abandoned 8 years before Lampert even showed up. By 2003, same-store sales had been flat or declining for years. The stores were aging. The suburban malls they anchored were aging. The demographics that built Sears, single-income families with a house and a garage and a need for everything under one roof, were shrinking. Revenue was declining. Competition was compounding from every direction. Under this reading, Lampert was a financial investor who tried to salvage what he could from a sinking ship. The stores were dying anyway. The real estate was the only value left. And extracting value from a dying asset is what investors do. Or was the extraction the point? Did Lampert recognize early that the real estate was worth more than the retail operation and structure the Seritage transaction to capture that value for entities he controlled while leaving the operating company with lease obligations it could never sustain? Under this reading, the failure to invest in stores was not incompetence. It was preparation. You do not renovate a building you intend to sell to yourself. Here is what the numbers say. The Seritage Real Estate Investment Trust was legal. The sale-leaseback is a standard financial instrument. The settlement was $40 million against billions transferred. Lampert lost money on his overall Sears investment. His net worth declined. But the asymmetry is difficult to ignore. The stores closed. 175,000 people lost their jobs. The malls lost their anchors. The communities lost the store where 3 generations bought school clothes in August and circled toys in the wish book in October and picked up a DieHard battery on the first cold morning in November. And the real estate ended up in a real estate investment trust that the same man controlled. I am not going to tell you what to call that. The story of why Sears failed is not a story about Amazon or bad retail strategy. It is a story about contracts. The numbers are on the record. What you call it is yours. If you are watching this and you have an opinion, the comments are already open. The 2 things people argue about most are whether Sears could have survived without Lampert and whether the Seritage deal was incompetence or design. I have read hundreds of comments across the internet on this topic. Nobody agrees. The evidence supports both readings. That is what makes it worth arguing about. If you are new here, this is what we do. We find the clause, the contract, the financial structure that killed the thing you grew up with, and show you exactly how it worked. If that is something you want to see more of, subscribe. Because next is Toys R Us. Same concept, different weapon. A buyout contract that loaded $7.5 billion in debt onto the toy aisles, then routed cash out as fees while the stores stayed open. If Sears was drained through rent, Toys R Us was drained through interest. And the paperwork is even clearer. That story is next.